We're here. Is it going?
Hello,
Oh
it might be
no.
already going. Yes,
Oh
we are
no, we can't
live.
even hear it. I can't hear anything, so I think we're fine. What's up? Yes, yes. Thanks for dropping by.
Hi, yes, yes. This is our first time. Oops, I need to turn off my phone
Oh
because I'm
no.
also watching myself on there.
Rough.
Yeah, this is the first time we are full deaf, and I'm gonna play a bit of intro music.
Oh, there it is. 30 seconds in. All right, well, we'll get it down. You know, this is a nice. Let's see if is it gonna loop? Is it gonna loop? What's up, Lamb?
It's gonna loop. I'm gonna stop
Lamb
it.
Chop, thanks for
One day
dropping
we'll get
by.
the music right.
One day we'll nail it. Today but that is not this day. How are you doing, Kristen?
I'm doing great. We're supposed to do the community ref
The what?
requested.
I don't know what's
Did you ever
happening.
watch Community?
Oh yeah, the try
Avid
Nobbit in the morning thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no. Okay. We'll maybe we save that for the next one then, because I
Oh,
want
okay,
to, like,
alright.
we can practice and then we can nail it
This
when
is
we
really
kick
sad.
off.
We did not have time to practice our little tribute to Community intro
That's
this
not
morning.
true. We did have time. We just didn't.
We did. I know. Instead, we talked about serious topics. But yeah, we are doing well, Daniel. Thanks so much for dropping by. And yeah,
Hell
thank you
yeah.
so much. How am I saying your name right? Nkanjika?
Braver
Thanks
than
for
me.
opening the links 40 minutes ago. I hope we didn't scare you.
Yeah, just popping up out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Oh, Riley, thanks for dropping in. Everybody,
Riley.
we're talking about the concept of power this week, as well as going over some bangers. Kristen, did you feel powerful this week?
Yes. And as I was
Nice.
telling you before we started, I didn't have a choice because I thought last week that if I didn't practice being powerful, then this would be the most hypocritical show ever. So I was
Really?
really mindful, and not that other word that I can't say anymore because it's no longer cool.
Banned.
And I was very conscious about it, so we can talk more about that. How about you?
No, I did not.
No.
I did not feel very powerful this past week at all. There was a lot of things. We, obviously had the stream last week at less internet. I appreciate the facial expressions for moral support. For anyone just listening, I'm not cackling like a psychopath, just like a normal path. But so no, I didn't feel super strong this past week, but I'm sure we'll get. Well, I say strong, not powerful, which it probably is going to help shape the discussion somewhere. But I wanted to ask before we get into some other stuff, what does power mean to you, Kristen? Because I think that that's a really important thing for us to clarify before we start just yapping.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from the chat as well. Like, when we use the word power, as it pertains to a person, what does it mean to you to feel powerful? For me, it is the negation or absence of fear. I think especially like as a woman, like oftentimes, like I'm in this game of fear dodging of like,
Yeah.
well, this will make me feel more safe. So I think like there's this like really strong association of safety that I aim for, rather and as an analog for power. And I think in general, White Swartz, I think the masculine approach is that there is this like seeking of power, but actually what you guys want is safety. It's like the opposite is happening for both fronts. A bold statement of the day.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I don't think I inherently see power and feared, or like I don't think about them as being in fear being like tied up so intimately. Obviously I see how they go together, or how like one can help achieve, I guess, the non-state of the other. But that's really interesting, because I think about it much more in terms of kind of like projecting something that I want to do onto the world. And obviously there's like hard power, there's soft power, there's explicit power, implicit, there's structures and individual stuff. Like there's so many things that we can go into, and I'm sure that we will. Looks like the chat is, I think, agreeing with you. on some things, and then I think other people, yeah, ability to achieve what I want, things like that. Like that feels generally like the tone. That's interesting. It's
Mhm.
very interesting. Well, anything else that you want to get into before I start showcasing some of the bangers?
Let's get into it.
All right. So I'm gonna see if I remember how to use a computer
Mhm.
after the week away.
Oh,
All right, popping up right here. I got it.
yeah.
You seeing it?
Yes.
All right. So we're going here for our listeners here. We got a classic Farcaster, Kazi here. People have been stressed this week about a lot of different things on Farcaster. His cast is very short. Y'all worried about losing followers? Jesus had 12. I think that there's versions of this joke that aren't that funny, if I'm being completely honest. But I think Kazi nailed it with this one. What do you think?
I think I have made the exact same joke before, and here's what I tripped over. Like at the time, I was like negating my own power because I immediately felt self-conscious, right? Because
Mhm.
then I would be literally comparing myself with Jesus,
Yeah.
and and at the time I was doing like a meditation coaching community where I feel like, maybe that's a little bit egotistical to start. But now I see like Kazi doing it. I'm like, this is freaking hilarious. Like I should have owned that joke. So that's why I thought when I saw it. And I think Kazi is the kind of person who could pull it off too.
What about Kazi makes him able to pull it off, you think?
I think the history of egotistical things that he says, but I think it's like you go through phases of Kazi, right? Because at first you're like, this guy, like why is he so full of himself? But then
Yeah.
you kind of realize that he's might be doing it ironically. And then like because I've
Yeah.
met him in person, I know that he's a super sweet guy and that he is not like faking any of this. And so I think like that's what made me feel like, oh, this is a really good joke because I know it's genuine, but yet when he does it, it's not actually coming from an egotistical place.
Yeah, it's an interesting, like very specific type of LARP that people that are high agency, I think, can do really, really well, where it's like it's self-deprecating while like having a lot of confidence in the things that you're trying to do. Which I think is fascinating. And then as I think Kai is how I would pronounce it, points out in the chat, this is only funny because Jesus doesn't have 12 followers anymore, I think. Like the idea that like if we're thinking about power and like what power means in the context of like internet stuff, which is what we talk about, like everybody that cares about internet and creator economy stuff is stressed about followers to some degree because they're really
Mhm.
stressed about their distribution. And Kazi's pointing out that Jesus at one point only had 12, which is like not an impressive number today because we have twice that many people just like hanging out on our live stream. Also, shout out to everybody hanging out here. That's sick. Like, really, really appreciate it. But like, the 12 is objectively bad if you were trying to make a career of like saying stuff on the internet. So, like, does that flavor of it change your thoughts about the joke at all?
That reminds me of how 12 is actually a really huge number if you are on a live streaming platform. Right?
Mhm.
I think like that's one thing. This reminds me of how for the longest time I didn't feel powerful because I felt like I couldn't tell anybody my social media numbers in the normie world and have people be
Mm,
impressed.
yeah,
And the thing is, as a creator, when I see another creator get like, 2 people watching this stream, I'm like, oh my God, that's so great. This is so much higher than the statistical average. And
yeah,
then you and I had many conversations where you were telling me that I'm already, at the time, like much higher than the average creator already in terms of views and whatnot. And
yeah,
so I think like there's also this relativism going on where like to be powerful, like you really cannot care. Like there's a saying, like lions don't care for the opinion of sheep. It's like kind of like that, where like if you're
Where
not in the game of creator stuff, like do not care about what non-creators think because they have absolutely no idea what metrics matter and what the numbers actually mean.
but that's really funny, and I might send you some Punisher stickers in the mail to go along with that
Oh right.
edgy
Oh
"I'm
gosh.
14 and this is deep" quote.
Yeah.
That's but but like there's something really, really I don't know if depressingly interesting is the word or is the phrase that I would use, but like
The
the,
show,
the
depressingly interesting.
yeah. No, that's a TikTok rabbit hole that I'm sure I'm going to go down now that I've said it out loud. But what am I saying? So many things that are the correct way or like a useful way to view the world are also actually really, really boring lessons that we've heard our entire lives and just like have kind of not internalized. And that's what like this kind of stuff is for me. It's a reminder that I could have learned whatever lesson I was supposed to learn when I was like 8 years old and actually not giving a fuck what people thought about what I was doing my whole life. But it turns out that I did. And I kind of like let that shape what I do. And, eventually it ends up in cool spots, but it's also summed up in a tweet there, like in a cast that I could just like accept and my life be a lot better. And I just don't. Hey Jeff, I appreciate that you like the show better when I was audio only. I understand this ugly mug isn't adding too much. But Kristen, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was going to say that before you swap over, I wonder if folks noticed that our PFPs are slightly modified. So I really wanted to show that off. So as many of you know, one of the struggles of doing a live stream, especially with most of our audience being on Farcaster, is that it's hard to let people when we go live. So of course you are here because you have seen the message, but those who are not, of course, there's those who don't want to attend. But we get a lot of messages after the show going, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I missed it. I didn't realize it was live." Blah blah blah. So I made these little PFPs that hopefully will refresh on everybody's screen as they are scrolling through, and then maybe if they see one of our casts, let's say live with a little red ring around it. And also, I've modified my profile to link to this current stream right now. So we'll see whether this makes a difference and if people notice. But yeah, it says here, share the cast, please.
Oh, I forgot. I don't think I can drop links in. I think they get scrubbed.
Oh.
Oh no, it made it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anyway, please share the cast so other people can find us.
Exactly.
All right, let's roll on to this next one. All right, so this is Dan Romero saying, if you're an artist on Farcaster, please reply with an example or a link to your art. I haven't looked through these replies yet, Kristen. Have you?
I did because I dropped I CC'd all the artists that I have bought art from. Because I really wanted to make sure that they saw this cast. As many of you know, maybe this shows it's fair because many people don't even see Dan's cast either until hours after. So I alerted the artists I know to make sure they have time to show off their art.
Oh yeah, there we go. I see yours. Yeah. Can you talk about your thoughts on the rest of this thread while I scroll through here so I can get a sense for the replies?
Yeah, so I want to give the little pre-context. So Priyanka had casted that Farcaster is for artists very emphatically. And then Dan liked that cast and immediately asked this question of, where are the artists? Where's your art? And the pre-context of this, if you had missed it, is that there's been this somewhat artificial drama that's been happening between Lens and Farcaster. So Lens is another social media platform that's decentralized. I don't think they have as many active users as Farcaster, so they're a bit of the underdog. Who knows? Oh, Jeff's in the audience. Jeff, which one has more real people on it, Lens or Farcaster, in your opinion? Expert opinion sought. But yeah, they have crafted this messaging, again, this is marketing, that hey, at Lens we care about artists, and at Farcaster they don't care about you. And so there's been a lot of this debate, and so I think it is in Dan's interest to showcase the amount of fantastic artists we have on here. And it's obviously a really awkward situation.
Is this power?
What Dan does?
Yeah, is the ability to make this post and get, we'll say at least 50 people to reply to it in a meaningful way. Is that power?
Yes, because there is the implicit power that he has, or actually maybe even explicit power that he has, right? Because by putting up this cast, like for many of us, when Dan asks, "Hey, can everyone with an example of X please put it out?" You always feel like, "Oh shoot, is he gonna put it together a directory? Like, is it gonna be like some way in which like I'm gonna be on some list?" Like, so there's always this like panic I get of
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I gotta make sure we're on top of these things." So that to me is power, and I see that others are also saying it's a power move.
If it's tied, like if your concept of power is tied with fear, like what is this power associated with?
Well, the D word.
Uh, oh, the demur?
No, not dictatorship.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I thought this was a callback. All right. So, all right. Actually, so
Actually,
that's
it's
an
a
interesting.
callback to the fact that you hate the fact that I censor words that don't even need to be censored.
Yeah, no, I don't like the like I think it is a fascinating phenomenon that the internet and like specifically internet censors at the various big tech platforms like get rid of words or like they de-emphasize words in the algorithm so people either like intentionally or like by de facto trying to get reach like say words like unalive instead of suicide and like
Mhm.
I think it's fascinating but I hate it a lot. Not hate it.
In
Hate
the
it's a
sense
strong
of in
word.
the sense of like 1984, like we
Not
are
even
in a way
that.
losing free speech.
I think it's I think I dislike it in the same way that like it and this is gonna maybe trigger a bunch of Germans in the audience, but like it like bothers me in the same way that like people wait for a crosswalk at a like a clearly empty rural road. Cause it's like a an acknowledgement of like this power that doesn't need to have power over you, I
Mhm.
think.
Mhm.
Maybe that's kind of the connection in there that like makes me want to sit on it for a second. Um, all right, I'm gonna kick it over to this next one here so we can keep this moving. Because if you haven't caught on, I'm gonna keep asking you about power during these, and I want to get to each of these. All right, so this is from Kardik, a noted Farcaster builder. Came on a little bit, I think, before, wasn't active, and then got a lot more active in the past year or so. But so the post here is focus has been on building the Glimmer account, which is an app that they're going to be launching soon, I believe, that they can reuse their infrastructure to make new apps quickly. So I imagine Glimmer is either going to have a bunch of different forms as an app very quickly, or they're going to make a bunch of different things that kind of look like the existing app at the same time. And so the reason why I picked this as like a banger for the week is like one, obviously the metrics did well on Farcaster. Um, but two, it's like a really interesting example of what I think projecting power in a specific like social group looks like because most people on the internet don't care about this at all. Like like the average person will see this post in their feed and if they're not into tech, not into like crypto or not like an engineer of some kind, I don't think it would like land on anybody's radar at all. But in the context of Farcaster, with all of the nerds in the audience, like myself, and I think you as well, this is much more interesting because it has like a bunch of different layers of stuff that people in this community think are valuable. Does like I okay, so I'm gonna take a
So
breath
wait,
there.
so
Just
what is it? What is it like a builder tool?
so it's not. So it is their own personal like I think I would call it like they're building a modular app stack for themselves
Mhm.
so they can just relaunch a bunch of different things. So if they're like, "Oh,
Okay.
Glimmer this week is book and movie reviews." Next week it might be something else, but they're going to use the same technical backend to launch a new thing, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And in Farcaster land, this is like such this is a very
It's nerd bait.
yeah, because it has like this engineering dream of all of your pieces being like usable multiple times and you can do a bunch of different things with them. It's increasing efficiency because you don't have to rebuild your whole app every time you're going to launch something new. Has a really nice technical demo with this like screen capture tool. There's
Mhm.
so many things in here that to me feel like such perfect Farcaster bait, as I think you called it.
So is Nook built on top of Glimmer?
No, I think they built Nook first. They realized, and it might have been like not explicitly, but it might have actually been. And
Mhm,
then their next like release for this Glimmer app was like, hey, we're using all of these different pieces of the ecosystem to
mhm,
make this like ideally like shippable very quickly mini app every time that they've like have another good idea.
mhm. Yeah, and so bringing back to the average non-app builder, um, so I think that's where, like, again, like each one of us has expertise that we can all share more freely on Farcaster. So I've noticed that
Mm.
actually a lot of our viewers, especially, like, turns
Yep.
out many of you are in the healthcare industry and, like,
Surprise.
are like working with patients or like in law school. Um, or medical school, etc. So I feel like I'm starting to find out more about y'all, like as I'm like reply guying on your messages, and like and I wish that I can learn more about what your day-to-day life is like, or your things that you've come across. So I think like that's where power also comes in. It's in earn secrets, right?
That's interesting. Megan Michelle in the chat says it's all middle school lunch table power moves and it never ends. And so I'm curious, Megan, if you could say a little bit more about that as we're rolling over.
Hmm.
The last thing that I have on this one, because like I agree, I want to understand more about our users and who's watching this, so that frankly we can talk about stuff that's interesting to them. Um, the really interesting thing for me is that like as powerful as this is on Farcaster, it's it's really not that interesting outside of like a couple specific contexts, even though this cast is kind of the culmination of like years of engineering practice and years of marketing practice and years of building stuff on the internet practice. And for me, like trying to think through, what is power, how do you use power, how is power helpful, and how is it like maybe not so helpful in other places in your life, like it's always a good reminder to know that like you can be really really strong in one area and then it actually just doesn't really help you if you're trying to do something else, which I think is it's fascinating.
Yeah. I want to put myself in position of power over you, Cameron. So
Please.
Huggle Monster mentions that, Cam, I'm right there on a suggested follows.
The So I gotta be kind of honest, I don't look at these suggested follows, but we will go here because I can get peer pressure, and
And that's how
I
we as a group can exhibit power over Cameron.
yeah. And if I see giveaways in my feed, I just unfollow you. So take that as you will, audience. But yeah, because it's just like it's already so hard. I don't know about you. It's so hard to find like my friends that I do stuff with on Farcaster. And so like adding more and more people, like it's awesome when everybody is excited about okay banger, but there's only so many DMs of people who are drawing my PFP that I can respond to.
Aw.
The
Um, but yeah, I think
yeah.
what you're bringing up is true, right? Like, actually, let me bring up Megan Michelle's message again. That it is middle school lunch table power because it is contextual. Like, power always comes in the context in which you have that power. Of course, there's people who are like world leaders who unfortunately have mega power. But like you and I joke about how like this is like an example of like Farcaster power, but outside the context of Ethereum builders, it's not going to be as meaningful even to other kinds of devs.
Yeah, 100%. All you got to do is ask old Tim and Mac over at Kiwi News what Hacker News thinks about stuff like this. The
Exactly.
All right, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock here because I want to get into kind of a freeform discussion. I'll drop this banger by Lamb Chop, who was in the chat just a second ago. Lamb Chop, if you're still here, please drop that melon, and we'll get the. Oh, I guess it's not going to be morning for our next show.
We
So
can say
maybe
evening. We just need to practice.
ooh, yeah. We will. We'll do Cam and Kristen in the evening, and we'll practice that for next time. And hopefully, we don't get a copyright strike. Who knows?
Yeah, let's see if we're on pitch enough melanin.
All right, so we're gonna watch Lamb Chop's Amazing Rescue. All right, this is so baby squirrel for listeners, and Lamb Chop discovered this baby squirrel and I think takes
Oh.
the baby squirrel home
Mm-hmm.
to take care of it. There's like a thread with more stuff. Yeah, like
Oh my
these little
God.
pictures here. It's very cute. And we talked about this last time. Cute animals, superpower on the internet, almost always a banger if there's a cute animal in it. Although the bar has increased. See this cute squirrel. Let's see if we can get a good full screen of that squirrel. It's very cute. Anything else besides the cute animals stick out to you about this, Kristen?
Gosh, I remember people were referencing lamb chop and squirrels in the tavern with Trisel and Bias last night. And to be honest,
And
I
you're
just
like,
thought it was a
what?
throwaway joke. I did not understand it's a whole narrative arc. So thanks for helping me catch up. Yeah, and lamb chop, I hope the squirrel does okay, and like you be a good squirrel mom.
Yeah, I'm sure Lamb Chop's going to be a good squirrel mom, but and also yes, Lamb Chop does have very nice nails in there. We'll try to get a shot of those up. Um, I think that there's just something magical about rescuing cute animals that like is always a pleasure to watch online, and I don't know if it needs to be more complicated than that, right? Because like sometimes really good posts are just like obviously good. All right, so let's jump onto this next one. Actually, there's something to be said about small animals and power, but we'll save it for the next section. Uh, all right, so did you see this post from Dan about his career advice for people in their 20s?
To be honest, I did see it as I was scrolling, and I didn't stop for it because I thought, 20s, that's not relevant to me. And then I looked at it again after you said you were gonna feature this, and I was like, dang it. However, I chalk this up to like this is the kind of advice I would give to someone else, but I would always preface it with like, look, this is easier said than done. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of nuance, especially when it comes to the optimizing step.
Yeah. I think that so for anyone listening, so Dan's general career advice for people in their 20s, figure out what you want to be when you grow up. Pretty standard. If that's too hard, figure out where you want to be in 5 years. Like pretty reasonable and standard. Work backwards from there. What's the best next move that gets you closer to that goal?
Mhm.
Uh, Optimize for one thing at a time. Optimizing for multiple things usually leads to worse near-term decisions, which I think is one of the more important lines in this. And then avoid side quests, rationalizing the optionality or ability to return to the main quest later.
So for the leads to worse near-term decisions, does that imply leads to better long-term decisions or no?
I don't think it necessarily implies that. I think it's easy to like draw that conclusion. But I don't think it is necessarily true. And I have a lot of thoughts on that, but optimizing for one thing at a time, is that important to you?
I
Also, I'm not
never
sure.
optimize for one thing at a time. So
A-
clearly it's not important to me to reveal preference.
and have you ever optimized for one thing at a time?
I think when it comes to projects, I'm a lot better. The problem is I
Okay.
have multiple projects and they all each therefore it spawns,
So
but I
so
think
that
if
sounds like no.
if this was true, then there would be no world problems. It's just not realistic. It's like, well, no shit. Like everyone should optimize for one thing at a time, but that is something that like people who are not under economic pressure can say. Like essentially, almost everything comes down to like money and survival, right? And if you can
Mhm.
somehow like take care of all that downside, as you say, then sure,
Yep.
you really should optimize for one thing at a time. If you're super loaded and you are doing multiple things at the same time, I'm like why are you doing that? But I think like that's for most people, including myself, it's the two things, right? There is like the, well, I got to keep the lights on, and also I want to do the thing. And those
Yeah.
things, like if you can combine it, that's great. In the timeline that's feasible, that's great. I think a lot of times the one thing we want to do will lead to financial success in the long run, but in the short
Mm.
run, what you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I think the easiest way to attack this is to be like, oh, it's just not like it's just not feasible for a lot of people to be able to do this as rigorously or as like maybe stoically is a good way to think about it.
Mhm.
um just like from the financial means. But I also think that there's like an interesting way to view it in that like all of this kind of implies that you're trying to get somewhere.
Mhm.
And obviously we're all trying to get somewhere in like some like vague sense of the word. Um but like anybody that achieves whatever they worked single-mindedly through their 20s like to achieve will
Mhm.
probably tell you is that like, oh, it didn't end when you hit that thing. Uh
Mhm.
and so I look at this as somebody who did not figure out what they wanted to be when they grew up in their 20s. In fact, like I'm still trying to figure that out. Um, and I would say like I
Ooh,
didn't. Yeah.
that's turning into one of my pet peeves lately, though.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
The,
What
like,
is it?
which I'm also catching myself and then trying to say less. The whole like, I'm just trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
situation, because it's actually a surprisingly disempowering saying. Because
mm,
like by definition, we are figuring it out, but it always by saying it that way, it's always just out of reach.
can you like talk about more about that? Is this something that you think people have like weaponized against themselves, or is there
Mhm.
something like are you interpreting it in like a different way?
So this is getting into like NLP stuff, like neuro linguistic programming
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah, yeah.
of whether we believe that the way we say and communicate our feelings and thoughts affects, like, has a feedback loop and causes us to think that way.
Yeah.
And so when I see my friends saying that, oh, like I'm just trying to figure it out, or like, I'm gonna figure my life out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna say this till we're like 80 years old. Like there's no
Yeah.
possible destination called I figured it out. That's called you're dead underground.
So does that mean we can't achieve enlightenment?
I think it has very little to do with our current concept of figuring it out. It's
Okay.
like it becomes that meme of like the guy who keeps looping on his thoughts. Like, I'm just trying to figure
Yeah,
it out. I'm just trying to figure out, like,
the like
and
I
it
need to
actually
do
doesn't
more
get you
guy.
closer to figuring it out at all.
Okay. So I think about this a lot if we're on the same wavelength here. Just can you keep talking?
I just realized that so I've been multi-streaming this onto my personal YouTube account as well, and some folks are in the other stream because they follow my other account, so I'm trying
Hell
to bring them
yeah.
over.
That's so funny.
Yeah, yeah. So Jacob has been sitting there alone, and I
No,
apologize. I didn't notice this because on StreamYard, it doesn't
it says
obviously
on
label when it's two
YouTube.
different channels. So come on over. The party's over here on the OK Banger channel.
Jacob, she's
Um,
just trying to make you feel better. You are actually the only person watching the stream and we're hallucinating everybody else.
exactly. Which that's okay. We only Jesus only had 12 followers. Um, so I think related to one of our earlier topics of last week when you were mentioning
Yeah.
don't be a little bitch.
Yeah, that is
That
what I said.
this was forever ago on Farcaster history. This was
Yeah,
like
it was a
2
different
weeks
era.
ago, where you were mentioning that, like, you use, like, "Don't be a little bitch" as a motivator, and then I
Yeah.
had my response of like, "Oh, this is such a masculine approach."
Which it
Um,
was a very nice way of disagreeing, by the way.
well, yeah. Well, I don't want to completely disagree. This is again the nuance of arguing on the internet. It's so much
Yep.
easier for me to disagree and say, "No, you should never say I'm,
Yep.
a little bitch." But that's
To
not
to
true. I think sometimes it's good too if you need
to,
it.
to catch everybody up, I
Mhm.
believe what I said on like via the cast was the optimal amount of stop being a little bitch in your life is greater
Mhm.
than 0.
Mhm.
And then I
But it's
followed
less
it
than
up.
1.
Yeah, and it's also less than 1 is like the next reply. And then I had like another one which I'm sure we'll get to. But
Mhm.
so that's where we're at. Kristen kind of agrees, right?
Yes, but I think to me, the number is closer to like 0.05 and not like
Mm,
well, I assume to be a higher number from you. In fact, I don't even know. What is that 0 to 1 number you're thinking about?
I think because we're like I think we're all dynamic systems that like need
Mhm,
different things at different times during the day. And so I
mhm,
think like and in different like times in your life. I think a previous version of me like might have needed it a lot more.
mhm.
And then a version of me needed it less. And then I actually think I'm like re-entering a phase where I needed a little bit more than I did in the previous like 6 months. And so that's kind of like to be a little bit more concrete, I think I probably need to be hearing it at least like a couple times a week right now.
What was the difference between a few months ago when you didn't and now?
The difference is kind of the trajectory of the things that I've been working on. And so I've kind of like gentle I've like tried gentle parenting myself with some things.
Mhm,
Cuz like every person has a bunch of different things that they need to do to varying degrees. Like we talked about making money. Obviously, we all got to eat. We all got to drink water. It probably makes sense to exercise if you want to like continue, like all these different things that we're supposed to do. And like ostensibly make our life better when we do them. When I gentle parent myself in the sense of like being nicer about the things that I am not achieving, I don't achieve them as much as I want to. And that could be something as simple as like eating in versus getting takeout or whatever. And the no more complain button for Cameron. Yeah, like this isn't the there comes a point in your self-reflection about the things
Mhm,
that like it's not depressed Cameron who's deciding your goals. It's like lucid Cameron. And lucid Cameron says, I want to do these 10 things this week.
mhm.
And gentle parent Cameron is like letting me get away with doing like 3 or 4 instead of the 10 that I know I can do and like want to be doing during the day. And so like that's when I like switch into that mode a little bit more.
So I feel like we're confounding productivity with the state of happiness, and that's my beef
Yeah,
with
yeah,
this
yeah.
thing. It's like you can, don't be a little bitch, but don't make yourself unhappy by with your own self-criticism, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like for me at least, I've noticed the pattern of like if I dangle happiness to be just beyond my reach, surely then
Mm,
I will be motivated. And that's the way we've been taught as children, right? But
yeah.
if we consider happiness as a somatic state, it's like the way you're feeling a mood that actually makes you more productive and more likely to get into flow state. Then we are literally stepping on the gas and the brakes at the same time when we motivate ourselves through these means.
Sorry, I lost you or I was
Mhm.
with you up until the last second. Like I
Yeah.
understand like
Mhm.
having a like self-talk makes you feel a certain way. You
Yep.
don't necessarily want to be like a gold starring your way to happiness because we know that
Mhm.
like if happiness is a gold star away, it's always going to be a gold star away. So like I'm
Mhm.
there on all of that. Can you like tie up the end again?
Yeah, so it depends on your own like long-term cost to calling yourself a little bitch. So because like I associate that saying maybe in a conventional way of like, well, that's just because criticizing myself, then
Yeah.
even if magically I've criticized myself to being really successful, I have actually like caused myself to feel deeply unhappy, which I think is what a lot
Mm,
of successful people have this issue.
yep.
And but my goal of success is to be happy, then I completely miss the actual goal. And that it comes back to the optimization thing again. Like, what are you
Yeah.
truly optimizing for?
Yeah, so okay, so I'm full there. That's like the insecure overachievers at Harvard Business School that
Mhm,
like I had they a lot of very sad people with a lot of like, money in the bank. Totally there.
mhm,
I'm talking about a different kind of cyclical problem. Like
mhm,
it's not a hey, I think happiness is 10 achievements away. It's
mhm,
a I have done the self-discovery to, like, decide what is important for me, to, like, feel like I'm living my life in a way that's, like, authentic and true to how I want to move through the world.
mhm.
And so, like, not doing the thing that reasonable, like, lucid Cameron wants to do is, in fact, a failure of me, like, being the authentic person that I'm trying to be, and, like,
Mhm.
there's a very reasonable amount of like hey, you are self-sabotaging with this that I think might need to go along with that. What do you think about that?
So if if we're caught in this loop of self-sabotaging, like for me, it's usually because there is some deep unhappy feeling inside.
Yep.
And I can sometimes like kick myself into the next cycle, like many of folks mentioning in the chat. But if
Yep.
I never resolve that feeling of feeling bad in the first place, then this is an endless cycle where I actually can never optimize myself out of it.
Hmm.
So like, that can be shame, that can be like something, you know what I mean? It always
Yeah, yeah,
traces
yeah.
back to like some origin story. So if you're comfortable sharing, like, deeply vulnerable question, like
Yeah.
what is that other story that is somehow linking back to your current state where you feel like you need to roll this like boulder up the hill, like
Yeah, I
Spence?
mean, like I'm very much a believer in the myth of Sisyphus for any philosophy fans out there. In that, like, you kind of just need to imagine Sisyphus being happy doing the thing, or
Oh
else
yeah,
you go
yeah.
crazy. Um, I think I've been thinking about it a lot in the context of power and what we're going to talk
Mhm,
about today, and like power doesn't make sense as like a concept in isolation. It like I think it makes the most sense in like the context of other things that it allows you to do. Like I said about like projecting power is really how I like think about it.
mhm,
And all of the things that I'm kind of wrapped up in is kind of a failure to project power onto myself of like the things that I like intellectually and I think like emotionally want. And that's to
mhm.
like, hit my exercise like inputs, hit my work inputs, hit my kind of like broadening inputs, hit my like creative like all these things that are like, okay, it doesn't need to result in some sort of like reward like anytime soon or even ever, but like
Mhm.
the inputs I know are the thing that are important to me. And so it's a power over others not to sell. No, like I'm not talking about prices at all. I'm talking about the lifelong. You wake up every day, and each day in its own way is like a ferocious gift, but it's also like, oh, it is an empty vessel that like I need to fill up with things, or I have the opportunity to, and other people don't. And
Mhm.
so like that's kind of the thing that I've been sitting in more because there's like a lot of privilege that I have and like the ability to think about that. But it's also like, oh no, I just some days are not just like knocking down the things that I want to do. And that's how I like default think about my day.
So, so sticking with the example of like knocking tasks out. So what I know about you is that you've been literally feeling sick.
Yeah.
And therefore, I would hope that if I was sick, you wouldn't expect me to finish my to-do list at the same rate. So that's where I'm like, well, like to me, I'm like, Cameron, you should be more kind to yourself and have a more realistic level of output while feeling sick. But I understand that, of course, that makes you feel worse because you're like, like I don't want to be kind to myself. I want to tell myself not to be a little bitch. So tell me more about this thought process.
Well, I mean, I think the inherent well, somebody else had a good cast about arrogance. I think the inherent arrogance in this entire discussion is that I think I have a feeling that's not dissimilar from other people in that like no, those standards are for other people and like I should be able to figure it out still.
I think you're more arrogant, actually.
Yeah,
The
I agree.
narcissism of thinking that you are different from everyone else.
Yeah. And like there's, everybody has some data in their life to indicate that they are dissimilar to other people. Some have more, some have
Mhm,
less. But you also have a whole pile of evidence that says you're a lot like other people. As much
mhm.
as painful as it is to kind of like, think about what 1 in a million in the human race actually means. And so I think I know it's wrong, but in the same sense that like all models are wrong, some models are useful. Like I've been able to get I like Sam points out, like bro's ego is getting in the way of his own happiness. And I think that's probably right. But do you think that you can be like perfectly level and happy and also have enough of a chip on your shoulder to do a really, really hard thing?
Yes, I think that's the delusion I'm trying to see through.
Okay, so
There is
do you
no
think that
need
you can
for
do both? You don't need a chip.
I don't need a chip. And I think most everybody, nobody needs a chip. That's the this is the matrix, guys. Like this is the whole thing. we've been told that, or like we grew up in this society that says,
Yep.
you know, like you need a chip on your shoulder, which is a very American phrasing. I just realized it means that
Yeah.
you always feel like you need to prove yourself, in order to achieve. But I think, like, especially as we are both in our 30s, like
Yep.
that's where we can liberate ourselves from this. Like, it's almost like it is like chain and shackles on our full like ability. Actually,
Yep.
our full power comes from not thinking that we need to do that.
I can buy that. I
Says I'm the most
also
skeptical voice ever.
well, like I can buy that, and I think that so Sam just mentioned that a lot of VCs say that you need a chip. I wonder the list of people that like built like there's a lot of ways to measure importance, but in this like very specific realm of like technology companies that I'm thinking about, the
Mhm,
amount of people that had a chip on their shoulder and did the thing that they wanted to do versus not feels pretty skewed in favor to the other. Obviously, there's a ton of survivorship
mhm,
bias in there, and like a society with more people with chips on their shoulder are gonna produce people with chips on their shoulder like succeeding
mhm.
at a higher rate. But I always wonder because like it really comes down to like, is the question, oh, this is a new generation of people building companies without kind of like this inherent toxicity in a way of
Mhm.
like doing it? Or is that a bunch of people who are coping themselves into feeling good about not even pursuing the thing in reality, which is also fine. It's just like the psyop I'm trying to like be aware of if I'm going into.
So, I think someone had mentioned it depends on your definition of happiness,
For sure.
right? And what I've observed is that the people who are absurdly successful financially appear to be deeply, deeply unhappy by their actions. And the people
That
I
could be branding.
admire. Hmm?
That could be branding. Like just I
Oh,
think that they
you think they're pretending to be unhappy?
I think it's so much easier to retain capital and power if other people think you're unhappy, so they don't necessarily want to pursue what you have. Like I
Oh,
do
you
think
think
that
it's a
there
deep psyop? You sound like my wife now. That it's the man keeping you down.
I'm not saying that that's it. I'm just saying it's pretty convenient that like
Mhm,
when you have a lot of money, oh boo-hoo, I'm also sad though. So it's like it's not that good. Like I think it's convenient. You know what I mean? Like I think there's a lot of people that
mhm.
if they just had an extra 500K, they would just actually be a lot happier.
So I think I'm also thinking about billionaires. Like I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
like
yeah.
for most of us, like yeah,
I
there's
don't
a
think about
huge
billionaires. I
range.
don't they're fucking doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
they're crazy, right? So these are extreme examples. But like the people I've met who perceive to be happier have no money, literally no money. Like I think like that's also like a very like depends on what your cultural and religious like leanings are.
Yeah.
But like for me, I'm optimizing for a sort of happiness that is independent of conditions, including success or like
Yeah.
conventional worldly success.
Yeah. We've talked about this a little bit before. So one, you're a Buddhist chaplain and a neuroscience PhD.
I'm dead.
The percentage of people that you hang out with that have like that are on the like closer to the hey, I'm pretty comfortable with all of this like chaos called existence. Like you've met a lot of
Mhm.
those people, I suspect.
I have. It's really, really like talk about looking up.
Yeah. And like I think that that's a really incredible influence to have, but it's also like not the lived experience of most people and like the one that
I know.
they're ever going to have, right? Because
Mhm.
like it's so much easier I think to be, an enlightened person in a community of people that are all generally like enlightened, whatever the fuck that word means to you. And so like as someone who doesn't want to cloister themselves. I mean, actually, that's not true. I really want to cloister myself, but I know that that's not good for me. And it's not
Uh-huh.
like going to make me as effective at the things that I want to be effective at in like rational, lucid, intellectual Cameron like wants to do. Like me going to Montana and like, living in a internetless hut is
Sounds
not the move.
sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah. Um, but I also do want to live a little bit healthier, in at least in terms of mental state. Like, so here's what I
Mhm.
would love to be able to do. I want to wake up I want to roll out of bed. I don't want to groan out of bed, but I want to roll and be like, hell yeah. I want to go prep food for my cats. I want to get ready for the gym. And I want to go from that like prep to the gym without having some sort of like invisible hand of procrastination, just like make me fuck around on TikTok for an extra 30 minutes that I didn't intend to. And like each sequence of my day that I've like been like, okay, this is the thing that I want to do next. This is the thing that I want to like spend my like limited time on. I want to do that without like the friction of like avoidance pulling it.
Mhm.
And like I think for me, if I could achieve that or something close to that, like that's as
Mhm.
close to like power as I like really think is meaningful for an individual.
Yeah. So you have already achieved that.
Some days.
Yeah, and I also want to clarify, although you have painted me in such a I won't say like haloed picture, like as you know, like the reason why I study happiness is because like if I don't, I almost have an existential need because I go into deeply unhappiness mode,
Were
right?
you
And
were
that's
you
why
like a depressed teenager?
I'm a depressed adult.
No.
Yeah,
But
so
like were
that's
you a
why I'm like,
teenager too?
oh, for sure, for sure. Um
Yeah.
that's why it's almost like a existential need, like just as much as it is for like, getting food and all of that. I feel like
Yeah.
that the search for happiness for me is like, oh, if I don't like, talk about unaliving myself, like
Yeah.
there's also this like, tension there, right? Um, but I think like to negate the days that you do all those things
Yeah.
by being upset at yourself, or the days you don't do those things, like kind of like cancels it out, you know what I mean? And I feel like
Yeah.
that's to me that's the source of power, because for me, if I don't go and examine, okay, of course there are days where I miss on things and I get my DoorDash and whatever,
Yeah.
but if I don't take the time to be like, oh, but what are the days I make my lentil soup,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then so that I can then like reverse engineer, and work back of like, oh wait, what are the factors that led to me actually bothering to make the lentil soup? Then I can never actually optimize for not getting DoorDash.
Okay. All right. So a lot of things in there. I'm trying to like hit on maybe the one that's most important to me because I'm selfish. But
Mhm.
the you said in there about like unhappy days canceling out happy days. I don't know if I like that accounting because like so I'm ripping this from an Olympian. I'll try to remember her name, but she ripped it from her coach, who I think just made it up, but it's
Mhm.
useful.
Mhm.
And it's basically like
All fiction, apparently. That's what I learned from
yeah.
bias.
But so basically like when you're training for something hard, even if
Mhm.
you're a world-class athlete, you basically like a third of your days are going to be like wins, a third of your days you're going to feel like you're not going anywhere, and a third of the days is you're just going to feel like you're just totally fucking this thing up.
Mhm.
And like two-thirds of your days not feeling like you're making progress towards your goal, which is what that math turns out to, is
Mhm.
incredibly depressing in a certain way.
Yeah.
And like knowing that you could be doing the exact right thing,
Mhm.
and two-thirds of the time that you show up, you're not going to feel like what you got out of it was what you put
Mhm.
into it.
Yeah.
And half the time you'll be wrong about that because it's just like a neutral day, but like that's real. But like reflecting on this in the car this morning, I kind of think the things that make parts of life like really extraordinary,
Mhm.
like it's not because there's like some sort of cosmic balancing for me. It's like knowing that most moments are ordinary is like what makes anything extraordinary about any particular like thing that happens like stand out. And so I
Mhm.
view it less as like normal moments cancel out good moments or bad moments cancel out good moments, and more like since it is all like, relative hedonistic adaptation, like in order to actually appreciate anything that does happen to us, like consciously, it
Mhm.
has to be in juxtaposition to the other massive experiences that we don't have that are just like not explicitly good.
Mhm.
Uh, does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I also like I'm noticing a lot of comments here about how it's a balance. The
Yeah.
D in adult sense for depression. I'm trying to say it's not a balance. And I think that is what I think is very misleading, especially for like those of us raised in society that has a negativity bias. It's like we have to be absurdly positive in order to break through. And that depression, like, of course, like if you're clinically depressed, like definitely that is
Yeah.
a real thing. But our perception of like what is going on and our intrinsic biases can be tuned. Like what we think, at least for me, I thought for the longest time that, okay, I see these positive people, I should be a tiny bit more positive. But I didn't realize that, oh no, like for me, I'm so off the charts that
Yeah.
way that I need to tune it way the other way. And sometimes I'm like even this whole stream, I'm like, am I being like a positivity coach? Like right now, like there seems to be a lot more extreme, right? But this is actually just tuning back to normal. Like it's not that much off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of say something similar to my neurotic friends that are worried about not achieving things. And
Mhm.
like the fact, and I think I might have said this to you actually, the fact that you're so stressed about it not working out means that you're probably just going to be fine with whatever you default were going to do to solve your problem because you're so stressed about it.
Mhm.
And so like the
Which we both say to each other. And then,
yeah,
like
yeah, but like the
mhm.
pendulum swing back to like positivity. Some people might say like toxic positivity. Like
Mhm.
I think it's real and valid. I also would like it to be able to be criticized, but maybe in the context of like why it exists in the first place. That just makes it hard because somebody like people are primed to assume it's full wrong, which is also what we're not saying.
Mhm.
What do you think?
And I'm seeing that, like, Kara's bringing up a good point. That yeah, like
Yep.
there's totally a thing as toxic positivity, right? I scroll my Instagram reels, and then half the time I'm like, oh god, this stuff is horrifying. What they're telling people. I'm like, don't sweep your problems under the carpet and post weird like Instagram reels. But I think there was this like tendency to even now, right? Okay, like I'm imagining after our stream, what do we usually do? We usually go through and go, okay, what can be better? What
And
do we
after
miss?
action review, that's what we do.
Exactly. Exactly. Immediately there was a retrospective. Um, but and even in the first few times, I was like, oh no, I forgot this, our Twitter stream is not working, etc. And I think like these are the little like one death by 1,000 cuts I'm trying to do less of like going, oh, you should have done this and that, because that has never ever helped. And like instead, like if we and I lean in what worked well and double
Yep.
down on what works well, that usually works better. And I think it's like generally like that.
Does it work better because it works better, or does it work better accidentally because we just like stop stopping?
That I think like optimizing for motion to some and action to some extent, right?
Yeah.
And if I tell myself don't be a little bitch, like there's a really high risk of me doing nothing.
That's so interesting because my reaction to it is to get up and move.
Hmm.
Like exclusive, not exclusive, but like almost exclusively that kind of energy comes from when you're doing push-ups and you're sucking and you're feeling sorry for yourself and you like go to stop. And
Hmm.
like the energy is like, hey, you are frozen in fear and or quittingness and
Hmm.
you need to like get your head out of your ass and fucking do the thing.
Hmm.
And so that's interesting that like my context for it is to push for motion, whereas like the concept you've just mentioned is like to push for stopping. That's
Right.
interesting.
Because I rebel against myself. And I also feel like, as you've trained many people in the military context, that self-selects because of the whole environment of that,
Yeah.
self-selects for people who are motivated by this. But I
Mhm.
believe that there's just such a wide range in which we can motivate ourselves that,
Yep.
especially if you look on stuff on Twitter or whatever, the motivational shit, I'm
Yep.
like, dude, like half this, like most of the stuff would never apply to most people. And a lot of people do this thing, which I've actually talked to people who post motivational stuff on Twitter and Instagram. They're
Yep.
posting it because they feel bad right now and they're trying to motivate themselves. And then they present themselves as a guru by accident because people think that they're actually following that advice. I think it's super dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't just post a bunch of casts because I'm trying to talk to myself. That's definitely not what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that's why I love your cats. Like half of them, I'm like, oh, cats, that's cute. Like they you don't post motivational stuff, or at least not
Ugh.
not obliquely motivational stuff. It's subtle.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's more kind of like you show up to the workout class, but you kind of like went insane before you walked in. Like that's kind of the energy I'm trying to bring to the function.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hitting our time, but I wanted to ask this before we go. Who do you think the most powerful person you can think of is?
Hmm. Well, I feel like there's a lot of theoretically there is a historical Buddha person who existed who figured out a path of awakening, and
Yes.
therefore theoretically that is the most powerful person. I'm sort of caveating this really heavily because
Yep.
in Buddhism it's not like Christianity, or at least it's not like the mainstream form of Christianity where
Mhm.
the writings and scriptures are taken literally, and
Yep.
historical analyses of the Buddha indicate a lot of what even I practice as Buddhism may not be true.
Yep.
So it's like, the theoretical idea of the Buddha is who I would consider the most powerful.
That's interesting. Cuz I still don't know if we've like landed on a coherent definition of power after all of this. The cuz like I think the concept of power
Hmm.
is inextricably linked to responsibility. Or at least like historically, it almost always goes together. And I think just because people, through a lot of trial and error, realize that like power, whatever it means to you, without like a mirror level of responsibility,
Hmm.
always ends up with somebody doing some nasty stuff, right?
Hmm.
And so like we see a lot of like Elon's the most powerful person, or Zuck's the most powerful person, or all these different people. Whereas like 200 years ago, the kind of power that the people we're talking about like have would go immediately with like responsibility to like a kingdom or something like that. And ostensibly,
Hmm.
we have like laws and stuff that are trying to restrict some
Hmm.
of the worst aspects of it. But like none of the laws we made were like made when the internet was invented that like really matter.
Hmm.
And so like that piece is super missing.
Yeah.
Um, and as somebody who like has to, varying degrees felt like powerful, I've been in like stressful situations where like I had to make a decision. So technically I was like the power person in that
Hmm.
those situations. I
Hmm.
also now have a little bit of a voice on these like online platforms where there's like kind of a sense of responsibility in that like there's a community justice aspect to it. But like
Hmm.
when I look out and I'm like trying to think of like who is a powerful person, because like to me you're a powerful person because like I listen to what you have to say and I think you're thoughtful, intelligent. There's people in chat that I feel are like that as well, maybe not to the same degree, but like I don't really know if I can look at anybody who's powerful today and be like, hey, this person is powerful in the sense of like what I want it to mean,
Hmm.
because like I want them to have that like baggage that comes along, that like sense of responsibility that comes along with it too.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, like I'm
So it sounds
I
like you're associating power almost with care.
oh, say that one more time. You cut out for me.
Oh, I feel like your definition of power almost has like a form of care associated with it. Like because you mentioned like kingdoms and things like that.
Yeah,
Theoretically, they are the ones who are supposed to care for the most amount of people and improve their lives and reduce suffering, right? So therefore, the
yeah,
one who's most powerful has the most influence, as knowledge professor is pointing out, over the most number of lives.
yeah, yeah. Like for me, the the care, like care is how I think I would like describe it if you led me to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my definition of like leadership really comes down to like the military one, where it's like a leader's responsible for everything the organization does or fails to do.
Mm-hmm.
And like that one sentence is like maybe the most like impactful on me in terms of like trying to, get a group of people to accomplish tasks together. because like knowing that you're on the hook for the stuff that you fail to do too is in one way like the conversation we were having about like putting so much on yourself that like
Mhm.
it's impossible to function. But on the other hand, it's like there is nobody else that is in the position where that like plausibly could be kind of like how you decide to go about it. And
Mm,
so I think care actually is a really big part of power for me. Thanks for drawing that out.
mm. Yeah, and I think like many folks here also mentioned in chat that technically it is yourself as well, right? Because we can the person with the most attainable power ends up being yourself because you're the
Yep.
only person you can control, and therefore the most range of power possible is from self-understanding.
That is a nice sentiment, but I acknowledge that there are people that don't have control over their lives right now too.
Where I'm like, I think that's a caring statement, but I'm like, I hope that's not disempowering.
Nah. The the nuances of like stating an opinion and that opinion being like disempowering to other people, like that's a tough thing to navigate because
Mhm.
somebody said this to me the other day, like you're always somebody else's Nazi. And that's just a fact.
Oh. Yikes.
Yeah.
I hope you're also someone else's helper in some ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Hopefully.
yeah. So I think we can end on that. Thank you all so much for joining our
Whoops.
chat.
Sorry.
Yeah, so let's yeah, I think y'all in the chat brought up some really, really great points today. So I hope you all like get to walk away and think about your influence and your circle of power, which I think is much
Power up.
larger than we all can acknowledge and realize. And that I would love to see you exert your power on the timeline.
She means mint. Mint our stuff.
Oh right, we're supposed to we totally missed our
Yeah,
song
totally
ad
botched
read.
this.
All right. So I'll play the outro music in a second, but
Woo!
what Cameron and I really want to do is to be able to feature more of your presence on Farcaster and to give you a little boost of power. And so if you keep up with your minting of our episodes, so now it is up to episode 4, we will randomly choose a viewer and talk about that viewer on stream. So
Hell
hopefully
yeah.
this will be a way for us to get to know you better. And thank you so much for supporting our show. So outro music.
Thank you all for stopping by. Had a blast. Love talking power with Kristen without too much prep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something we need to be cognizant of.
What? Prep too much or not enough?
Oh, I mean like power, safety.
Oh yeah.
Strengths,
Yeah, we didn't talk about
influence.
half the stuff I wanted, but that's okay.
I feel like I'm reading out the titles of Robert Greene books right now.
Yeah. The okay banger laws of power.
Exactly.
Bye everyone.
Bye.